For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. The Senate Committee on State Government Finance and Policy and Elections is meeting to consider 4 bills, including one that would require each state department, institution, and agency to use zero-based budgeting, a practice that means budgets are completely started over at $0 every year. Another bill under consideration would require that the state avoid contracts with vendors engaged in boycotting Israel. Let's go live now to that committee.
Thing is working, and that's oh, there we go. All right, we'll have a little do-over here. Okay. Calling the meeting to order of the State Government Policy and Finance and Elections Committee on Tuesday, February 14th, 2017. So, members, today we have a very full agenda of bills in front of us. Good to be having that, and appreciate that very much. And so with that, our first item on the agenda is Senate File 65, Zero-Based Budget Requirement. Senator Fischbach, this is your bill. And again, as you know, the rule, say your name for the record and so on, and then proceed to presenting your bill. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much. I'm Michelle Fischbach, State Senator from 13. And I do have the A2, which is an author's amendment I'd like to offer. It is a delete all. There's some language cleanup, and so someone on the committee would have to offer that. But
thank you, Senator Fischbach. It is an author's amendment. We'll just give a moment here for it to go out, and I appreciate your including some of these things that clean up some of these areas. Appreciate it very much. And members, this is an author's amendment, and as we normally do, author's amendment are applied to the bill as an author's amendment.
And Madam Chair, if I might, I have one that we got a while back, and I just want to confirm, please.
That you have the one that we're seeing as well?
Okay,
it'll be brought to you. By the way, to let you know, several people brought handouts, and we are working to get them copied, but it's added a little extra for our staff here. But as a courtesy to those of you, we're trying to get those copies so that everybody can see them. So, Senator Fischbach, are you good with this? This is the amendment that you wish to do? Okay. All right, members, we have the A2 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. Senator Fischbach, proceed to go through your bill.
And Madam Chair, I'd just like to point out that we did invite Dr. King-Banyan and Mr. Peter Nelson. Neither of them were able to attend, unfortunately, but Dr. Banyan sent this handout that I hope you have that should have been, we provided a copy of it to the committee, so hopefully you have that. And Mr. Nelson provided the one entitled Budgeting for Outcomes, Getting the Results You Need in an Age of Permanent Fiscal Crisis. So just so that you know that they would have liked to have been here, but unfortunately schedules didn't permit. So I will just go through the A2 as amended.
Senate File 65 as amended.
Excuse me, I'm
Senator
sorry.
Fischbach?
Yes. And basically what it does is, it will provide for zero-based budgeting for the budget, obviously, as we're going through our budgets. And then in the back page, there is some requirements that would have to be included in that information that we would get. That would be information such as the justification for the existence of the activity, quantitative estimates, several other things, program outcomes. So there are some things that would be required on that back page. The first page is basically just saying we need to do zero-based budgeting. The MMB would provide technical assistance. They would have the ability to write some rules. But I think the back page is where you're going to see what would be included in those proposals and what we would be included in the information we would get to do the budgeting with. So I mentioned the itemized accounting of expenditures, the amount of money that would be required to maintain the quality and quantity of the services. So those are some of the things that would be required in the zero-based budgeting plan. I understand that I believe Deputy Commissioner State Budget Director, Ms. Kelly will be testifying, and were able to meet a couple of hours ago for the first time regarding, and I know that there was some questions about maybe some additional detail on some of those activity issues and what kind of information we were looking for. So there may be if we are able to pass it out to finance, we will continue to work on those things and potentially create more detail on those items on the back page. But I know that, zero-based budgeting would be labor-intensive, but I think the change is worth it. And we need to understand better, not only for transparency, but for accountability. We need to understand better what's in our budget, what's in that base budget. Then we are able to spend more efficiently and prioritize better on the things that are important to the people of Minnesota and the taxpayers. And we will also, that second page also provides for all of that additional information that we'd like to see so that we can make those responsible decisions. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have, but I think that it's a pretty simple piece of legislation.
Thank you, Senator Fischbach. And just to clarify, we have a quorum now, so we can officially apply the A2 amendment. So members, having heard the discussion before, and so all those in favor of the A2 amendment to Senate File 65, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails, is adopted. Now we are all ready to go. Thank you for your testimony, Senator Fischbach.
And Madam Chair, might I just address I think you may have the fiscal note.
Mr. Lundin, are we able to?
We're getting some copies made of the fiscal note. It was just signed off right before the committee, and the fiscal note was prepared on the bill as originally introduced, so it is not taking into account the amendment that we have just been discussing.
And Madam
Senator
Chair,
Fischbach.
Madam Chair, I understand that, and I just got this 2 hours ago, and then it was delivered via email about 6 minutes ago. So unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to read through it. But it is correct that it is written to the original bill, and I did agree with MMB, with State Director Ms. Kelly earlier today that we would continue to work on it because she didn't have the delete all either. But then again, I just got this 2 hours ago, so it's a little bit of a concern. But I just wanted to make that point. So this could potentially have some significant impacts.
Thank you, Senator Fischbach. And as you know, my understanding is that this bill would go to Finance Committee, at which point that more complete fiscal note and some of that additional effort can continue to the Finance Committee. So with that, members, seeing no further discussion, Senator Fischbach, we would like a motion to pass this bill, recommend this bill to pass and to be okay, I wasn't quite sure here. So we do have a testifier signed up on our list, Margaret Kelly. Is that Ms. Kelly? Okay. Ms. Kelly, please come down. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Kelly. And just for the record, for the audio tape, if you just again restate your name and your title.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Margaret Kelly, State Budget Director, and thank you for the opportunity today to speak to you about Senate File 65, zero-based budgeting. The Budget Division at MMB has a broad set of activities we are responsible for, and preparing the governor's budget is one of our responsibilities. While it is the governor's budget recommendations that we prepare, we publish the document for your use. So our goal is to effectively communicate the budget and any changes that are being made to it. We do consult every other year in advance of the document coming out with House and Senate leadership, along with chairs of Ways and Means and Senate Finance, to seek advice from you on the form and format and content of the budget document. So we welcome your input. We also work closely with fiscal staff in the House and Senate to make what adjustments we can to the document to meet their needs as well. So let me speak first to the process for building the documents you use. The background narratives are built in Microsoft Word, and we can easily make changes to the form and the content of those pages. The fiscal pages, however, are documents that are generated from our budget system, and any changes to these pages require modifications to our system. Some are simple, some are more complicated, some would require a new budget system. Our current document is over 3,000 pages. It includes background narratives which describe the activities and goals and performance measures of each agency, and for many agencies, the programs and activities within the agency. The budget also includes spending in previous years, base budgets in the next 2 biennia, and changes the governor is recommending. While our fiscal pages show spending at a relatively high level, compensation and other the high level is compensation versus other operating versus grant, the system itself contains more detail which can be reported out. So while we do have a lot of information within the system, it seems as though not every piece of information you're looking for is either there or being reported out to you. Our fiscal note is based on conversations we've had with other state budget offices who have experience with zero-based budgeting or something very similar. The level of review and analysis, as Senator Fischbach mentioned, has required a greater commitment of staff resources in those other state agencies, and our fiscal note reflects that. I appreciate the opportunity to work with Senator Fischbach to clarify exactly what information you're looking for and the extent to which we would need to modify our budget system to make those changes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Thank you for your testimony. And Senator Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, Ms. Kelly, can you name a state where this has actually been implemented and works?
So, Madam
Ms.
Chair,
Kelly.
Senator Carlson, I spoke with the state of Oregon, who 4 years ago implemented zero-based budgeting with their new governor. They did it for one budget. The governor did not see the results he was looking for, did not get what he wanted out of that budgeting process, and they have not continued to do it. I spoke with the state of Georgia that does something similar to zero-based budgeting. They call it zero-based budgeting, but it does not start from a zero base. What they do is on a portion of their budget every year, their goal is to do 10% of their budget every year so that after 10 years they will have done the entire budget. They do a deep dive, doing some of the detailed analysis that is asked for in this bill. And their feedback was that they're not sure the legislature is getting what they want. They continue to do it every year, and it is labor-intensive on the part of the budget staff.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Senator Carlson, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I guess I want to follow up with a comment that, we have the NCSL report here. They talk about in 1979, U.S. Government Accounting Office found little evidence that zero-based budgeting had improved the process. By the 1980s, the use had all but disappeared. In Florida and Oklahoma, they abandoned their experiments with it. And that kind of fits with what my experience has been. Being in the business community in 30 years, there was always that rumor that zero-based budgeting works, but no one tried it. And in the school districts, and everyone would always give lip service to it, but it just didn't seem to work. And I don't know where it works today. And yes, I see that it looks like there's quite a fiscal note on it now. And I don't know that I'm willing to put that kind of money into something where all of the history is that it just doesn't work, or that it doesn't exist, or that there isn't a foundation that it can be built on.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. Senator Fischbach?
And Madam Chair, Senator Carlson, I did mention at the beginning that the fiscal note could potentially be changed, so I would have to say that we will take another look at it, just because, and I just got it not much longer before you did, so we will take another look at it. But in addition to, as Mr. Lundin mentioned, it is written to the original bill, so we will take a finer look at that. Ours doesn't necessarily, phase it in. It doesn't, but we may be looking at that, where it's more like a Georgia, where it's phased in so that every 10 years, everything is looked at, if that would potentially save dollars. So there are things that we can do. I'm sorry I can't address exactly the dollars that are shown on that fiscal note, other than it will probably be a bit different.
Thank you, Senator Fischbach. Okay, members, this bill, we need a motion. I'll move that Senate File 65 as amended would be recommended to pass and be referred to the Finance Committee.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, members, all those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? No. Motion prevails and is adopted. You're on your way to the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee
Thank you,
members.
Senator Fischbach.
Up next on the agenda, we have Senate File 78. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Senate File 78 is establishing a legislative budget office within the legislature. And so with Senate File 78, Mr. Chair, I would first like to offer, as a member of the committee, the A1 amendment to Senate File 78 as an
So-
author's amendment.
Does everyone have a copy of the amendment? It appears everybody does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to move the A1 amendment to Senate File 78.
Okay. So moved. Senator Kiffmeyer. Oh, I'm sorry. We need to, vote on the amendment, the author's amendment. Everybody,
All those in favor?
yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. So, amendment passes. Okay, Senator Kiffmeyer, now that the bill is in the shape and the condition that you'd like, could you please walk the committee through the Senate File 78?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So the Legislative Budget Office establishment is done in the majority of the states, and we appreciate the fact that though we support and encourage and need the executive agency in regards to their expertise, their knowledge, and their information that contributes to the establishment of budget, nonetheless, the legislative branch of the government has a duty and the responsibility to take that and to establish the budget that eventually is put together with targets and a variety of other processes, a lot of input along the way. But this establishes a legislative budget office. And so just to go over it a little bit, it's under the control of the Legislative Coordinating Commission to provide the Senate and the House of Representatives. This is again a joint effort to support both bodies with nonpartisan, accurate, and timely information on the fiscal impact of proposed legislation without regard to political factors. Requires the LCC to appoint a director who may hire staff, sets the director's term at 6 years, and specifies the director may not be removed during a term except for cause after a public hearing. It does remove in Section 3 the statutory duty to prepare fiscal notes from departments and agencies to the Legislative Budget Office. Requires agencies to supply information for fiscal notes on request. Permits the Legislative Budget Office to adopt standards and guidelines governing timing of response to requests for information and governing access to data. Requires agencies to comply with the standards and the guidelines. This also, in Section 4, moves the requirement to prescribe a uniform procedure for agencies' contribution to preparation of fiscal notes from the agency heads to the Legislative Budget Office. In Section 5, moves the duty to prepare local impact notes from the Commissioner of Management and Budget to the Legislative Budget Office, and appropriates money from the general fund to the Legislative Budget Office. In addition, the amendment that was placed on this bill in particular is from Senate File 939 as introduced, and this is the performance-based budgeting. We've heard before of zero-based budgeting. I think we have in our packets here zero-based budgeting. We have smart budgeting for an era of limits. We have budgeting for outcomes, and I thought we didn't have enough names, so we now have performance-based budgeting. And the whole idea around any one of them, members, is to consider, as I've mentioned before, we as individual families know how in our budgets, periodically, especially when there's a downturn, you take a look and see, is that cable all that we need? Is that telephone all we need? Is the balance of clothing and all those things? This is a normal process to go through to any Minnesotan's budgeting process. So we too here in the legislature, we should consider these factors as well and make sure that the efficiency of government, the necessary funding of government, and there are necessary funding of government duties. We have roads and bridges, we have the education aspect of it, but it doesn't mean that we can't consider, are we doing them in a way that the outcomes have the performance that we're expecting? And there's pretty much only one real way, in many ways, for us in the legislature to accomplish that. The other thing is that when you realize that in a fiscal note area, this is kind of a large amount of work in a short period of time. By including the performance-based budgeting aspect of the Legislative Budget Office, we're able to give this staff some institutional knowledge in regards to the budgeting, and therefore when the time comes for fiscal notes in coordination with the agencies, this Legislative Budget Office would serve us very, very well. One of the things that I think is important in recognizing this, that we're listing things like quantifiable program outcomes that measure the workload, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of each program and its activities. Some other things is explain trends over time in outcomes. Sometimes they have worked well for a period of time, and then life circumstances have changed. And so we too, in the Legislative Budget Office and the consideration of what we do, need to reflect the program's overall effectiveness in the trends over a period of time. The other thing is to itemize the expenditures that are needed to maintain the minimum level of service required by statutory authority. We've referred to it sometimes as scope creep, that you accumulate things that are not required by statute but just start becoming part of the customary process. So we go back again to the statute and make sure that those things that are required by law are a priority, and then secondly, are the outcomes of that statutory requirement in keeping with the intent of the legislation, and should we consider doing them in a different way through a different methodology? Doesn't mean that the goal and the outcome isn't worthwhile, but make sure that we are doing them in a way that is respectful of the taxpayer dollars. And that is something that we, in our due diligence to the general public, to Minnesota taxpayers who have their own budgets to deal with, that we make sure that we are efficient and effective, and we make sure that we measure those performance-based budgeting outcomes. So, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that is my introduction remarks to this particular bill. Be glad to answer any questions, though I believe we do have a couple testifiers.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. We do have two people registered to testify, and if we could have Mr. Alter and Mrs. Kelly. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Alter, could you please state your name and your title for the record, please?
My name is Joel Alter. I'm with the Program Evaluation Division of the Legislative Auditor's Office, and Senator Kiffmeyer asked me to talk a little bit about some work we did a few years ago doing an evaluation of the legislature's fiscal note process. We issued that report in 2012. You have a copy of the executive summary, I think, in your packet. And so I'm not here to testify for or against the bill, but I think a little bit of context would be helpful about fiscal notes. As you know, you've already been talking about fiscal notes on the previous bill, so you know them well. But they are, as if it needs to be said, a very important part of the legislative process. The idea behind a fiscal note is to estimate the incremental dollar impact of proposals to change state law. Nearly all states and the federal government have a formal process for estimating the fiscal impact of proposed legislation. But as you look at how states do it, states approach it in different ways and through different processes. And in our 2012 report, we looked at that. We actually went to the statutes of every state and parsed out how they do things. At that time, 31 states had primary responsibility for fiscal notes, kind of the final responsibility for them rested in the hands of a legislative agency, one or more legislative agency in each state. In 11 states, including Minnesota, that responsibility for fiscal notes was primarily with the executive branch. There were 7 states where the responsibility was very significantly shared between the legislative and executive branches. One state, Hawaii, did not have a formal fiscal note process. I should mention, though, that even in the states where there was primary legislative responsibility for fiscal notes, those legislative budget offices rely considerably in the development of the fiscal notes on executive branch agencies for the information that is used to prepare them. Just a few things that I want to highlight from our review of Minnesota's fiscal notes. We looked at issues like timeliness, the format of the fiscal notes, whether the assumptions were reasonable. In terms of timeliness, we said that most of the fiscal notes were done in a manner that legislative fiscal staff and others perceived to be timely. About half of them were prepared within 5 days of the request. It can certainly take longer than that, as you know. When bills are complex, when they involve multiple agencies, it can take longer. During a budget session like this one, when there are simply more bills being processed, it can take a little bit longer for a fiscal note. And sometimes it depends on the bill itself and how clear the language is. Sometimes agencies do struggle to try to understand what a bill means and then how to put a dollar figure on that. In terms of the format of fiscal notes, we found that they were generally satisfactory, that the components that we would look for a good fiscal note and one that would give the legislature a good overall picture were generally there. But one of the things that was missing was, even though there was a requirement that the fiscal notes always have and state their assumptions clearly, sometimes those assumptions were not adequately explained. And so we recommended greater effort on the part of the executive branch to provide that kind of explanatory information. In terms of reasonableness, we found that most fiscal notes appeared to be based on plausible assumptions, but there were certainly exceptions. We found some fiscal notes that actually had math errors and other types of errors in them. We also found some where, in our view, the assumptions that were made by the executive branch agencies were open to question. In terms of overt bias, we generally did not see explicit statements in the fiscal notes about the merits of the bills in question. We occasionally saw a sentence or two here or there that we thought was probably unnecessary. And at times, it certainly is possible. I would say that the more likely potential for bias is in the assumptions that the agencies make. It's certainly possible that some of those assumptions can be colored by the outlook of the agency that's preparing it. I should also add that we didn't see any instances where the governor's office was inserting itself in the process to try to direct the outcomes of fiscal notes or instructing agencies to prepare them in ways that would make the fiscal impacts come out in a particular way. So what we found in this evaluation of the fiscal note process was a process that worked pretty well. There were certainly some fiscal notes that were open to question and that we highlighted in this report as being worthy of discussion. We made a number of recommendations for improvements, both to the legislature and to primarily MMB. I should mention that MMB took very much to heart the recommendations, made quite a few changes in the instructions that they give to agencies. They also overhauled the actual hardware that they use, the fiscal note system. On the issue of a legislative budget office, we did discuss this option briefly toward the end of the report, along with several other options. And those options included things like, should there be some sort of an appeal process if someone doesn't like, let's say, the assumptions that are made for a fiscal note? Should there be a process for appealing that? Or should the authors of the bill be able to respond to the fiscal note in some way that's actually printed in the fiscal note? What we said is that as we considered those options, we didn't find any of them compelling enough to make a recommendation in favor of them. And again, I think that went back to the fact that we didn't consider the fiscal note system to be fundamentally flat out broke. There were certainly improvements that needed to be made, but we think there are things that can be discussed about potential alternatives, including a legislative budget office. Again, just a couple of observations. If you choose to go to a legislative budget office, in every state that has that sort of an approach, they do rely a lot on executive branch agencies to supply the information and do a lot of the legwork. I do think that if you go that direction, it's important to think through the roles of, for example, in Minnesota, the legislative fiscal staff, who certainly play a large role today. And, I think the question is, would they be a part of this new office, or would they play a supplementary role? What would MMB's role be going forward as it relates to fiscal notes? Ultimately, though, I think what it comes down to is an issue of trust. You as legislators, as you're considering legislation, as you're introducing legislation, you want fiscal notes that are prepared professionally and that are based on reasonable assumptions. And I think what you have to consider is, what is the best way to accomplish that? And that's why you have a bill in front of you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Alter. Ms. Kelly, please state your name and title for the record.
Thank you. Again, my name is Margaret Kelly, State Budget Director with Minnesota Management and Budget. And thank you again for the opportunity to comment on Senate File 78. I just want to respond first to Mr. Alter from the OLA. We appreciated the audit that they had done of our fiscal note system. It was actually the second evaluation we've done of our fiscal note process since 2010. And with both evaluations, we have made the recommended improvements to the system. And I appreciate that they noted that most of our fiscal notes were placed on plausible assumptions. We have made improvements in our advice and guidance to agencies in terms of clarifying their assumptions, and our review has been improved as well. I also appreciate the comment that they made in their review that they were unclear whether moving the fiscal note process to a legislative budget office would result in a better outcome. And that's one of the concerns I have that I'd like to talk about in another minute. But also, and I think I've said this, all of the recommendations from that audit have been implemented on the part of MMB. There may be more to implement, but those are outside the purview of MMB. So I want to speak again to the scope of responsibility for the budget division. We strive to create and share objective, relevant information and tools for decision makers, and to coordinate and communicate fiscal policy statewide. In addition to fiscal notes, we're responsible for coordinating the governor's capital and operating budget decision-making process for both the regular and special legislative sessions. We're responsible for publishing the governor's capital and operating budget recommendations. With the capital budgets, we collect and publish agency and local government requests and then publish the governor's recommendations. And with the operating budget, we publish agency-based budgets and then governor's recommendations. We're responsible for maintaining and publishing fund statements, which are the state's bottom line for the general fund and for all other funds. We review and approve agency spending plans and internal service fund rates. We implement legislative funding decisions in the state accounting system. We work closely with our accounting services and debt management staff to monitor agency spending to ensure it is consistent with legislative decisions. We prepare and communicate the biannual revenue and expenditure forecast, and we work closely with our Economic Analysis Division to produce the November and February economic and budget forecasts, which are the basis of the budget setting process that you're undertaking this session. We publish numerous reports: the price of government, the economic and budget forecast, agency departmental earnings, the disaster assistance fund, permanent school funding, and results first metrics, to name a few of the reports. We consult with and train with state agencies to improve the use of their data and performance metrics. We're working currently specifically with Corrections and Human Services and local governments on cost-benefit analysis for certain services. I mentioned the scope of our work to help explain our fiscal note on this bill. We have quantified the commitment of resources that we make towards the fiscal note process, but because of the scope of the work we do throughout the year, and because the nature of our staff working over 40 hours a week, certainly during the legislative session and oftentimes outside of that session, we're not able to reduce our budget in order to maintain our ability to meet the rest of our statutory responsibilities. I have two concerns that I just want to bring up with this bill. I'm concerned that Senate File 78 will create a duplicity in state government. I appreciate the author's interest in finding efficiencies and finding a way to be more effective in the work we do, and I'm concerned that this may move us further away, and that we may actually be creating a triplicity in that we will have MMB reviewing fiscal notes, we will have fiscal staff reviewing fiscal notes, and we will have a legislative budget office doing that. Even if the authority to sign off on fiscal notes is moved from MMB to a legislative budget office, MMB is still responsible for reviewing and assessing the accuracy and reasonableness of completed fiscal notes, and we will continue with this work to track the impact of legislative activity on our state budget and to meet our obligation to ensure we adopt a balanced budget. I'm also concerned that putting the responsibility for fiscal notes with the legislature may challenge the nonpartisan nature of the office you're trying to create. The fiscal note for the LCC suggests that at times, the staff of this office may do their own research to generate a fiscal note and not rely on the expertise of those currently managing a policy area, meaning state agencies. I believe the nonpartisan fiscal staff of the House and Senate currently provide a check and balance to the current process, and I'm concerned we may lose that. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Do we have any comments or questions for our panel?
Mr. Chair, I think one thing, just to, as a matter of record, there is a preliminary fiscal note in your packet, and Ms. Kelly just mentioned that that is official now. They have signed off on it. So for the record, we have an official fiscal note.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Alter, in the OLA's review of the fiscal note issue, can you tell me what current protections or currently is in place in terms of the legislature's oversight of MMB's and other state agencies' preparation of the fiscal notes? What can we currently rely on?
Madam Chair and Senator Newman, first of all, there is some language in statute that specifies what fiscal notes are and the responsibility of agencies to produce them. There is some language, but not much, in legislative rules about fiscal notes, but that's certainly a prerogative of each body to develop those rules. I would say this, there is nothing in the legislative rules that requires, when a fiscal note is prepared, that the legislature abide by that. And there are certainly times when the legislature receives a fiscal note that it doesn't agree with. So I think that opportunity is always there for the legislature, using its own judgment, relying on observations of its staff, to disagree with a fiscal note and maybe to move forward with some different assumptions. And I think the legislature does that at times. I think my observation is that the legislature tries very hard to be respectful of those estimates and use them when they can, but sometimes they haven't. And so I think the legislature does have some independence in this to adopt what it chooses as more appropriate assumptions if it disagrees with a fiscal note.
Senator Newman?
Mr. Chair, so Mr. Alter, if I hear you correctly, on individual bills, individual fiscal notes, we always have the opportunity to question them. But there really isn't a mechanism in place to review the overall scope of fiscal notes that are prepared by various state agencies. Would that be correct?
Mr. Chair and Senator Newman, I think that's correct. And I would just add, we mentioned in the report, and I alluded to it, that we discussed the option of, should there be some sort of an appeal process if, let's say, a legislator introduces a bill, a fiscal note is prepared, and that legislator says, you know, that's really off base from what I had in mind. Should there be an opportunity for that legislator to either put a comment in the fiscal note or in some other more formal way to appeal it? But again, I think it goes back to that there is nothing particularly formal or required about, the legislature doesn't have to follow what the fiscal note says. And so I think that's part of the reason we didn't suggest that recommendation or report, that it remains a somewhat informal process that the legislature can kind of take or leave on an individual fiscal note basis.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
excuse me, Mr. Alter, you are again talking about an appeal process with respect to an individual or a specific fiscal note. There
Mr. Alter.
isn't in place.
Sorry, Senator Newman, go ahead.
Yeah, there isn't in place a mechanism to review the overall process. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Senator
Mr.
Newman,
Alter.
other than a report like ours, there is not.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion, comments? Oh. Senator Westrom?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Kelly, I think, might be the best, or Senator Kiffmeyer. Would there be an ultimate way to just pay for this out of money that we're already allocating to agencies and they're spending staff time to do this? How ultimately do you anticipate paying for it, or could we pay for it otherwise, Mrs. Kelly? Because there should be some savings by consolidating this into one office, correct?
Ms. Kelly?
Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom, I don't believe that you're consolidating this into one office. I believe that you're creating a new office that will be responsible for this. MMB will still have responsibility to review fiscal notes. State agencies will still have responsibility similar to what they do now for providing the analysis to complete a fiscal note.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Kiffmeyer, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
So it is really kind of amazing to me that you can have this large amount of work being stated that they have to do on the one hand, and yet if that coordinating work and all of that is taken into a different office, that somehow there is no savings. But this is exactly the point. We're having a discussion here about a fiscal note to the Legislative Budget Office about fiscal note. So very relevant conversation, and to let you know that certainly we will be continuing this discussion and the opportunity to have the bill officially presented to a committee, and to do that definitely is a commitment as we do this, that we will continue to have those discussions and go forward with that in mind as well.
And
Senator
Mr. Chair,
Westrom?
follow-up. Senator Kiffmeyer, this strikes me as the federal government has what the GAO, General Accounting Office. This would be somewhat similar. You said most states already do this. Is there an ability to keep it nonpartisan, or what's your sense or feedback on that? And knowing others have done it, I'm just interested to know, because it certainly is an interesting concept. I remember years ago, conversation with Representative then Lauren Soberg, and the common joke about fiscal notes is many of fiscal notes have been used to pass bills, and many of fiscal notes have been used to kill bills, and meaning that they're steered one way or the other depending upon who's in the governor's office, or who wants or doesn't want some legislation. And I think it's meritorious to try to take as much politics out of it as possible. But what's your feedback from other states? And the GAO seems to be well respected in this regard.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Westrom and members. I think what's interesting is that on the bill authorship on this bill, we have both the majority leader and the minority leader of the Senate co-authoring this bill. I think it demonstrates a very bipartisan interest in this, and I think that bodes well for this kind of bill. And I would suggest, Senator Westrom, that I concur very strongly that, and that's why in both the performance-based budgeting and in the Legislative Budget Office to this date, the language has helped to direct it in such a way, and in our ongoing work to structure it and set it up in such a way that it is as independent as possible. Is it one of those things that maybe being under the LCC, because of the very nature of it, it may need to be structured a little differently? And so we're having those conversations, have had that, And we're doing some ongoing research, and this bill, Mr. Chair and members, will actually, will both progress to the Finance Committee, but also stay within this committee so that we can continue on some of those structural things as we also address at the same time some of the finance issues.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Wistrom.
Senator Kiffmeyer, last question, just what safeguards would you be proposing, or do we need to look at as far as ex parte rules? I think of the PUC, and they have strong ex parte rules for meeting with any advocates or groups one way or the other. What do we currently do to keep that from tainting things and keeping it independent, or what ex parte rules would we need to be looking at to keep it as independent and fact-oriented as possible?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom. Probably the biggest difference with the PUC is they are regulatory and they have actual adjudication. So they make determinations and they make a very, very different thing, whereas legislative budget office or even in the fiscal notes, this goes before a legislative body that then takes that and makes a determination as to it. What I would say is that some of those, Senator Westrom, is something that we have discussed as well. And we'll take a look at some of that kind of language where that may be appropriate. We'll take a look at other states as well and see what are some of those parameters that I put around it to help assist in that, keeping it as bipartisan, nonpartisan, and neutral-based as we possibly can do.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Any additional questions? Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kiffmeyer, I don't see anything in here that gives the agency a sign-off ability on the fiscal note or on the report. Are you planning to put something in there to have a sign-off? And also, is there, and I think you have it in there very, very well, that the agency has to provide information, but will there be an appeal process in there for the agency to be able to appeal the result of this output from the budget office?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Carlson, members. But I think you have to remember that in this, there are some other states that have had a shared function. I don't know that this would necessarily be going that direction, but remember the content of the information already comes from the agencies, and the presumption is when they give us that content, and that is included in the fiscal note, presumably if it is from them. Now that discussion going in regards to that and clarifying and making sure the assumptions and all of that, as is done today, so would continue into the future. I don't think that necessarily has a change in that regard. And that's one of the questions. Certainly the executive branch, this is kind of an issue where I feel you have the legislative branch and you have the executive branch. And without a doubt, the executive branch has a vested interest in their implementation of some of the laws and things that we do, that they have a vested interest in that. And we have a vested interest in making sure of that as well. So I think that would definitely be a consideration, but I would say as we take a look here at some more language, both what Senator Westrom brought up as well as the issue brought up, which we have discussed as well, that'll be something that we will definitely consider in our future language.
Great. Senator Kiffmeyer, do you have any additional closing remarks that you'd like to add?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, members, for the consideration of this bill today. Without question, we want to make sure that our legislative duty that we have, and we do have a budgetary legislative duty with the advice, we appreciate all the input from the executive branch and that would continue. And so, members, I would ask for your support of Senate File 78, and my motion is to recommend this Senate File 78 as amended to be referred to the Finance Committee and also to stay within the purview of this State Government Policy and Finance Committee for future work on the policy side, Mr. Chair, and that is my motion.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. If no further discussion, hearing none, the motion is out of order because it can't go two places. so we can move forward. Okay, we'll recommend the Senate File 78 recommended to pass and be referred to Committee on Finance. That is the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against, say nay, no, or opposed. Motion passes.
We'll talk some more. Right.
Sorry.
Ms. Kelly, did you sign the testifier sheet? She's going to sign it. Yes. My microphone on. Thank you very much. Great. The next item on the agenda is Senate File 90. Senator Bruce Anderson will be presenting the bill. Welcome, Senator Anderson, to our committee. Glad to have you here today. And your testifiers are coming forward. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members, for allowing Senate File 90 to come forward. Madam Chair, I would like to, there's an oral amendment that I gave to your staff, and if someone on your committee could move the oral amendment to get the bill in the order that I would like to go forward with our testimony, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. And we do have our general counsel who will report out the oral amendment.
Madam Chair, I believe the motion will be on line 1, or page 1, line 6, delete 950,000 and insert 650,000.
Okay, that is the motion, and that is an author's amendment.
Madam Chair,
Senator Nelson.
I'd like to move Senate File 90 as amended.
You're moving the amendment. We need to put the
Oh, I thought it was an
amendment on
author's
first.
amendment. I'm sorry, I thought it was an author's amendment.
It is an author's amendment. That's what we are doing. It's an oral author's
Yep,
amendment.
okay. I thought we usually just move the author's amendment with the bill, but I'll move just the amendment is just fine.
The author's amendment has been moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. Senator Anderson, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the bill before you, Senate File 90, deals with a project that came to me and other veterans and other senators and representatives dealing with Vietnam and the many members within the state of Minnesota that served our country during Vietnam. And maybe many of you, your members here on this committee, have family members or friends or loved ones who served at this time. What this bill is doing is it's a bill to help understand for generations to come what Vietnam was all about and what we as Minnesotans had to go through as we served our country in Vietnam. I served myself during the Vietnam era. I did not go to Vietnam itself. I was in the east, on the East Coast, actually in the Mediterranean, but did know many people from my boot camp and from my training schools that did go on to Vietnam. And what we're asking here is finances to help fund a project to help Minnesota remember. And I have people that would testify to this bill because they are the ones that are basically going to be following the project through to its completion upon our, as a legislator, passing it and having the governor sign it. So without further ado, I would love to have Mr. Straczynski or Mr. Pagliarini testify, and maybe I should have Mr. Straczynski introduce himself for our committee.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Straczynski. I understand you're going to go first here. All right.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Bill Straczynski, and I've represented public television for 35 years here at the Capitol, and I am pleased to be here this afternoon. I hate snakes. Wait, was that a cobra I just killed? Does it ever stop raining? Why is it so hot? How many days left do I have in country? Will I be brave? Will I make Mom and Dad proud? Are we patriots? Lord, don't let me fall asleep on my watch. So much noise. What's a hot landing zone? Did somebody yell, medic? Where's my morphine pack? Where the hell's the dust off? B-52 bombs sure make big holes. Night ambush patrols are full of terror and frequent chaos. Remember to pull the pin before you throw. Why are they protesting? Why are they calling me baby killer? Why are they spitting at me? These are just a few of the questions and thoughts that were on my mind when I served my tour of duty in Vietnam in 1967 and 1968 with the infantry. I was a medic. Similar thoughts were probably on the minds of every other GI who served in Vietnam or who served our country during that period of time. This public television project, Vietnam, Minnesota Remembers, will provide an opportunity for Vietnam veterans to tell our stories, to secure our dignity, and to forever preserve the public's respect for those who served. I'm pleased to introduce here at this time to tell you more about this initiative Mr. Jim Pagliarini, who is the CEO and President of Twin Cities Public Television, who's coordinating this project.
Thank you, Mr. Trzynski. And Mr. Pagliarini, if you would go ahead and say your name for the record. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jim Pagliarini, and I'm the president of Twin Cities PBS. And Madam Chair, members of the committee, Bill, Senator Anderson, thank you all so much for your support of this important project. Even though I'm here as president of Twin Cities PBS, I'm here representing the entire Minnesota Public Television Association. There are 6 stations that serve the state, and each of those stations in every corner of the state is going to be a part of this project to be able to reach out to Minnesota Vietnam veterans and engage them in this work. The reason this is so relevant and urgent right now is I talked to Bill Trzynski probably 6 months ago when I became aware of the fact that Ken Burns this fall is going to be producing and distributing through PBS an epic documentary on the Vietnam era. So it's going to be 18.5 hours broadcast across this country on PBS. And I think you know that that's going to awaken memories, it's going to open wounds, it's going to introduce a younger generation to a war and to veteran experiences that are very, very different than our veterans are experiencing today. And I said to Bill, I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to seize this moment to be able to open up a conversation to honor Minnesota's Vietnam veterans and tell the Minnesota story. So I think because of this attention, because across the country, really it's going to be consuming this country a conversation about Vietnam in the fall, we have a chance to do something quite impactful in Minnesota. I think most of you know, as Bill alluded to, that the Vietnam War was one of the most divisive conflicts in American history since the Civil War, and it was often expressed as this division between veterans and non-veterans. In Minnesota and across the nation, veterans were shamed upon their return from Vietnam. And as you heard from Bill, even 50 years later, there are still open wounds that require healing. But it's only by hearing stories and sharing experiences that we truly can gain a deeper understanding about this war and its impact on an entire generations and its lessons for today. What we are envisioning is a major initiative. This project, when fully costed out, will come close to costing Twin Cities PBS and the Minnesota Public TV stations $2 million. We are asking the state with this amendment to support about 1/3 of that. We're willing to commit out of our own budgets and through private fundraising the resources to realize the full vision of this project. And it is an ambitious project. It will have 5 major components. The first, as I said, is the Ken Burns documentary, which is just going to provide an opportunity for our communities and people in the state of Minnesota and across America to have a conversation about the Vietnam era. We will complement Ken Burns' documentary by producing stories of Minnesota veterans that will intersperse with his documentary to tell that story. It's going to be viewed in the state of Minnesota, I would guarantee, by millions of people. The second component that we are going to do with this project is produce a documentary that's going to tell the story of the secret war So Minnesota's Vietnam veterans, as you know, include many Hmong refugees who fought in the CIA's secret war in Laos. So through this film, we will underscore the reality that the secret war, actually unacknowledged by the CIA until 1994, was an integral part of the history of Vietnam. And it's interesting that Ken Burns is not telling that story in his national documentary, so we will also distribute this documentary we produce here nationally. Minnesota is home to some 70,000 Hmong folks. The service of the Hmong's veterans was recognized recently, as you know, with the public memorial. We have a trusted relationship with the Hmong community, and we have a brief moment in history to capture the firsthand stories of many of the elders who fought in the war, the story of their flight from their homes and their resettlement in this country. The third component is an interesting project that we are doing in collaboration with a nonprofit organization named the Telling Project. And these folks actually are performing art groups that work with veterans all across America and take their stories and then craft them into theatrical play. So we have engaged them to come here, identify a few Vietnam veterans, and take their stories and the process of making those stories into a theatrical play, which will be produced on stage at Twin Cities PBS and across the state. And we'll produce a documentary following the development of that theatrical play and the actual play itself. The fourth component, which is the one that I am particularly excited about, and it has the opportunity to engage literally tens of thousands of people in Minnesota, is the creation of what we're calling the digital story wall. So imagine if you've been to the Vietnam Memorial and you were able to touch a name on that memorial and then go in and learn about that person, hear his or her personal stories and memories, look at the memorabilia that that veteran has from the experience. So we're creating on a digital platform what will be the equivalent of Minnesota's Vietnam Memorial. Our vision is to engage schools, veteran organizations, and all different kinds of community organizations in having veterans come tell their stories, capture it through video, audio, and photographs, and then build it onto this digital platform that will then be archived for generations to come to use in schools and across the state. The final component and the fifth component of Vietnam Minnesota Remembers is to have the project culminate a little over a year from now with perhaps an event at the Capitol where we literally dedicate a day to honor Minnesota's Vietnam veterans. So we've already committed significant funding for this project, and much of it's underway, but we're really holding back until we know whether we have the resources from the state to really take this to the scale that I think we need to take it. The Ken Burns series is going to have America talking about the war. It's going to stimulate questions, awaken memories. And this project is really about having a safe place and a way here in Minnesota for those questions to be answered and the stories to be told before they were lost. And finally, to honor and thank Minnesota's Vietnam veterans for their service. So we are very grateful for you considering this and ask your support for this important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pagliarini, and I appreciate very much. It touches a little personal thing for me, as my husband is a Vietnam veteran and served in the Army Nurse Corps, taking care of direct battlefield casualties, and has traveled within the local St. Cloud area when he came back home. But probably most amazing thing is, you're welcoming home, we're a young married couple, and my handsome soldier coming home, and he wasn't in uniform, and we all know how handsome they are, and when they're in uniform, it just kind of ups it a little bit. But he wasn't in uniform, and I asked him why, and it was because he could not wear his uniform back home, that he had to take it off before he got on the plane and landed in the U.S. So he fought the war, did the duty of his country, took care of the soldiers, but for his safety's sake, when he got back to Minnesota, he had to have his uniform off. And I think that is a real tragedy for these veterans. And the message is, no matter how you feel about a war, don't take it out on the soldier. They do not deserve that. They have stepped up with honor and dignity to represent their country and to do what they're told to do. But this is a generation that has a history that needs to be told. And I really appreciate the fact that at the very bottom here, you say it's time to remember to honor and understand. And I think I appreciate the fact that we understand all sides of that story. It is incomplete to only tell one piece of it. So I appreciate your global perspective in telling the story, and it's a very important time to capture that as we go forward. So members, are there any questions for our testifiers? All right, Senator Carlson.
I don't have a question. May I make a comment?
Sure.
And I've spoken to Bill Strusinski about this, that I'm hoping that you're going to cover a very special part of this for Minnesota. It's called the Twins Platoon. The Twins Platoon was 150 young men that were sworn in on June 28th of 1967 at a Twins game. And they're known as the Twins Platoon, and there is a book about them written by a fellow named Christy Sorrell. And it just so happens that my best friend was part of the Twins Platoon. And they were sworn in, went through boot camp, and actually were deployed in country just before the Tet Offensive. And I don't know what their survival rate was, but there were some that did not come back home. And there's one fellow that his name was Skip Smith, who was wounded in 1968 and was medically discharged, but never did really totally come home. And in 1972, he committed suicide. And I was at the flag raising a couple of years ago where they finally did recognize his service, and he did get an award, and they raised and lowered the flag down here at the Vietnam Memorial. And I learned a lot from my buddy. I learned a lot when I participated in this honor of the Twins Platoon. They still get together. I know that they go around the state and sometimes make appearances. I don't know how many of them are still identified, but it is something that it really affected me to read their story and to read this book about them.
Thank you, Senator Carlson, and we do appreciate those sorts of things as well. And I just want to comment, too, on your including the Hmong connection and the fact that many of them, at great personal risk to themselves, went behind enemy lines, rescued our soldiers, and helped them to escape at great personal risk to them. They were freedom fighters, very honorable in that regard, and I'm glad to hear that you're including them as well. Senator Jasinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great project. I was in the service, military service, Navy from 1986 to 1990. I was in 2 conflicts. Unfortunately enough for myself, I was out at sea, about 500 miles away from the actual action. I was controlling aircraft into attacks. So I know the military background. I was very fortunate to be at that location versus on the ground in the troops like Vietnam vets. Just this last summer in Faribault, we had the Veterans Traveling Memorial Wall that came to Faribault. And it went through the state of Minnesota, through the southern end of the state of Minnesota. And I cannot tell you how moving that was in our town, in our community, to see what happens when those veterans get together and can exchange stories and understand. I spent the whole day with several veterans from Vietnam and understanding their stories versus what mine was like. And very tragic events. I talked to a gentleman who didn't sleep in a bed for 8 months. He was in water or whatever, slough or whatever you want to call, didn't actually sleep in a bed for 8 months. So to listen to those stories, I think this is a great tribute to that, to tell people's stories. The electronic side of it is even more interesting to see how that can be and actually see the interest. So I commend you on this project. I think it's a great project for Minnesota and everyone to understand what these troops went through. When I came back from the military, we were in combat, as I mentioned, and when our ship pulled up to the pier, there were thousands of people welcoming us there and very proud of us. These veterans did not have that opportunity to them, so I think this will help with that. And I generously agree, and I think this is a great project, and thank you very much for the service that you've done for this.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. And so, Senator Anderson, in the light of the time of our committee here, we would like to lay this bill over for possible inclusion in our omnibus bill. That's my understanding. Is that your motion, or do you have other plans for it?
Madam Chair, I was under the impression that it was going to go to finance, but if you have some other place, but I'd love to go to finance right away, but if you are wanting to keep it in your committee, but...
Senator Anderson, we can do both, and so let's reflect the motion there, and that's, I will move that Senate File 90 be recommended to pass and to be referred to the Finance Committee.
Appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
members.
You are on your way, Senator Anderson, but we'll also keep it around just in case. Thank you. All right, we have our final bill at this time, Senate File 247. Senator Limmer and Senator Latz as well. Welcome to both of you to the committee. And Senator Limmer, we also do have some testifiers, both for and against, and just to let you know that as a committee, we'll be giving each group 10 minutes to speak and address the committee. But we'll start off. And do you have, I believe we can move Senate File 247 so that it's before this committee. And I believe, Senator Limmer, do you have an amendment?
Yes, Madam President. I have the A2 amendment.
The A2 amendment?
This is a delete everything amendment. It's an author's amendment. This is the first committee of jurisdiction. And I do have one additional amendment, well, perhaps even two additional amendments to that delete everything amendment.
Okay, I will move Senate File 247 amendment, the A2 amendment. We'll place that before our committee. We won't take a vote on it. We'll give you time then to amend your amendment. You can go ahead, Senator Limmer.
Madam Chairman, if I could direct the committee's attention to line 121. In this particular subdivision, we are referring to the legislature and its relationship to contracting with particular vendors. However, on line 121, there was an error in the language. It makes reference to a commissioner. And the commissioner would be an inaccurate reference, and I wish to strike the word commissioner and replace that word with legislature.
Thank you. Our general counsel will report out the amendment.
Madam Chair, Senator Limmer has proposed amending the A2 amendment on page 1, line 21, delete commissioner and insert legislature.
Okay, Senator Limmer, that is your oral amendment?
That is correct.
Okay, we will just take that one simple amendment. I know you have another one. So members all in favor of this oral amendment to the author's amendment?
Madam Chair?
Senator Westrom.
Just to clarify, I think one of us has to move it. So it's-
Yes. So Senator, I'm sorry.
I'll move that, Madam Chair.
Okay, council says that we should take both of your
that's fine.
Language changes here, and then we'll ask for Senator
Chair,
Newman to make a motion.
The other amendment that I would want the committee to consider was not added to this particular language, and that was the enactment date. And I do not have the written score on that, but if we could rely on the council, she can explain.
Senator Limmer, she has it here in writing. We'll read it into the record.
All right.
On page 2, after line 22, insert effective date. Sections 1 and 2 are effective July 1st, 2017, comma, and apply to contracts entered into on or after that date.
Senator Limmer, does that
That's correct.
fulfill what you'd like? Okay, so we have those two. And Senator Newman, do you want to move the amendment to the amendment?
I would so move, Madam Chair.
Pardon? Okay, council has said that we can actually move the amendment as amended.
Yeah,
Okay,
Madam
so
Chair,
the A2 amendment as amended by these.
all in one motion. So moved.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Newman. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Senator Limmer, you now have your bill in front of us, Senate File 247, as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm being joined today by Senator Latz, who has a unique interest in this particular legislation. And being the chairman and a former chairman of the Judiciary Committee, they're down the hall running on their own, and we're getting very nervous about that. But nevertheless, this is a bill that's very timely for the state of Minnesota to consider. Just a brief background. Over the last few years, both nationally and internationally, there's been a movement called the BDS movement. The words or the letters stand for boycott, divest, and sanction. And it's a theme development to harm the business relationships that come out of the state of Israel with states, businesses, as well as the federal government. And it's used to, in my opinion, wage a kind of economic battle against that particular country. States have reacted. 16 states have signed legislation similar to what we're proposing today. And that is to, in the reference of businesses that contract with the state of Minnesota as vendors, that if they engage in discriminatory practices against the state of Israel, using those themes, that this particular bill would prevent them from contracting with the state of Minnesota, or in the event of, in the midst of a contract, that it could be subject to termination of that relationship. That's what this bill essentially does. I do not want to take up a lot of the committee time because we have testifiers here, but I would ask that the testifiers in favor of the bill come forward, and we'll give them a unique opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. We'll do that. And so would the testifiers in support of Senate File 247 please come forward?
Madam President, while we're waiting for them to come up to the desk, there's also, in addition to the 16 states that have already passed legislation similar to this year there are 12 states that are considering the very same legislation this very year. We're
Thank you,
joined by
Senator
Ethan
Lemon.
Roberts right now, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Roberts.
Okay. Mr. Roberts, we have on the testifier list others as well. I'd like to have all the testifiers that are in support of Senate File 247 come up to the table, if you would, please. Just in the official, because once we start the clock here, we have a time clock here, and so once we start it, it will be up to, so we have one more that is coming forward. We'll get you a chair.
Take my chair.
No, not at all. Perfectly fine. And you can share a microphone, so you can, sir, if you want to just, yeah, there you go. All right. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Mr. Roberts, you are starting the
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. My name is Ethan Roberts, and I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, which is the public affairs voice for Minnesota's Jewish community. I want to thank Senator Limmer and Latz for authoring this bipartisan legislation, and you, Chair Kiffmeyer, and members of the committee for hearing this bill. We know that your time is extremely limited. As Senator Limmer mentioned earlier, this legislation is similar to bills that have already been approved in 16 other states, and it's about the BDS movement, which is seeking to demonize and discriminate against Israel and Israelis. Though the BDS movement masks their goals in the universal language of human rights and free speech, we believe it's anything of that sort. It applies double standard upon double standard to the world's only Jewish state and ignores the deplorable human rights record of Israel's neighbors. The goal of the BDS movement is nothing short of the destruction of the state of Israel. Because one of the main tools of the BDS movement is economic warfare against Israel, this legislation will ensure that Minnesota will no longer contract with vendors who subsidize discrimination against Israelis simply because they are Israelis. So with this legislation, we're not only standing up for our values, it's also to keep in mind we're also standing up for Minnesota's long-standing relationship with Israel, which in part is economic. It's estimated that we currently have about $87 million in annual trade with Israel, and more than 100 Minnesota companies are doing business there. Now, in a few moments, my dear friend Waleed Issa is going to testify that as a proud Palestinian, he sees no contradiction between dedicating his life to achieving a free and independent Palestine and strongly opposing the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. I think it's equally important for me to say, as a representative of the JCRC, of the Jewish community, that we too see no contradiction between our unwavering commitment to two states or two peoples, which specifically means a free and independent Palestine, and opposing the demonization, delegitimization, and the leveling of impossible double standards against the Jewish state of Israel. More than just saying that, the JCRC is proud of our work to be an ally, and that is it. We are an ally. We are not seeking to co-opt the Palestinian cause or the people, but to do what we can, where we can, to work with them in moving from charity and dependence to investment and independence. We have hosted, my organization, leading Palestinian businessmen at high-level delegations here in Minnesota. I've led delegations to Minnesota lawmakers, some of your colleagues, to the West Bank, to Ramallah, to Rawabi, and we're constantly looking for ways to leverage our relationships that we have as a Jewish community to empower Palestinians such as Mr. Issa to build a better future for his people. Now, I was prepared to testify on the constitutional issues with this legislation. I have good arguments. However, while we were waiting for the bill to be heard, I had an opportunity to visit with some of our friends at the ACLU. And it's possible that we may be able to reach some agreement. We can't reach it now because we haven't even had a chance to talk to Senator Limmer or Senator Latz, and they need an opportunity to talk to their people. But I'm hopeful that we can reach something that can make everyone feel comfortable on the First Amendment issue. And so rather than prejudicing that and going into our arguments, I'm going to pause here and allow Mr. Issa and Mr. Sharon to speak as well.
Thank you very much. And so just want to call your attention, we do have a little timer over there, so that may help you in your testimony here. So Mr. Issa, Mr. Sharon, which one? Just say your name into the, whoever's going to go, say your name and title, if you have one, into the record, if you would.
My name is Waleed Issa. I work in government relations. I have been here for probably, I've been in some of your offices, and you saw me around. My name is Waleed Issa. I'm originally from Palestine. I've been living here for the last 12 years in the state. Correct.
Welcome. Please proceed with your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I am a very proud Palestinian. I am also a very proud Minnesotan. I have the honor of carrying the two identity, and it's a badge of honor. You know, I just wanted to testify and clarify my opinion and my thoughts on this bill for everybody. And I think one of the issues that I am actually struggling with is actually the way we are testifying and with the way we look at the issue. It's, you know, people who are with this bill is this side, people who are against this bill. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict is not a black and white issue. It's a dark gray area that we have to explore, and we have to look into it before we decide. I am not here to testify to tell you I am against this or I am against this. I am here to tell you what I'm actually in favor of and what do I think about this bill. First of all, I have been in the state for a while, and I have been dealing with the issue on Palestinian-Israeli conflict on campuses for a while. And I think the level of tension and the level of dehumanization between the two groups in college campuses is actually very high. And also, I think that you know, the relationship between the state of Minnesota and the Palestinian is not as good as I hope it will be sometime soon. And based on that, I think, you know, the BDS and generalizing, and I talked to many of my Israeli friends and some of my Palestinian friends, and I think to generalize is a political sin. To say that all Israelis is this, all Palestinians is this, is very, very bad. I think it's actually undermined the courage of some of the peacemakers who are inside the Israeli side, work daily basis with the Palestinians. I really want to support these peacemakers and not give an opportunity for the extremists to use the Palestinian-Israeli conflict to be more extreme. So this is why I think we should look at the gray area, look at courageous leadership where we can oppose discriminating against one group or one state and also build relationship with the other group. I don't think it's enough to say no to BDS. I think it's more important also to look at the positive and start building relationship between the communities here and also support the Palestinians over there and support the peacemakers inside Israel. On that note, I just wanted to add and say A wise man once told me that, Jews and Arabs don't need to confirm each other's identity. They don't need to change their own narratives. What they need is actually find a solution to the conflict, a forward-looking solution. And this is what we have to focus on. Instead of actually identifying and pointing fingers at each other, we have to find a way to support the peacemakers inside Israel, inside the Palestinian side. I encourage all of you to look at ways that move us past the zero-sum game and find ways to support peace inside Israel and Palestine, and also support peaceful effort here in the state and connect our communities together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Appreciate your comments very much. So, Mr. Walid, I'm sorry, Mr. Sharon.
Yes. Dear Chair Kiffmeyer and committee members, my name is Ilan Sharon, and I have been a resident of Minnesota for over 20 years. However, I was born and raised in Haifa, Israel. I'm here to testify in support of Senate File 247. With respect for your time and the other speakers, I prepared a written statement that is much longer from what I'm going to speak today, but you actually have a copy of it, so I'm just going to read some parts of it. I want to start by sharing with the committee why, as a person who was born and raised in Israel, I believe that the efforts to boycott Israel are based on discrimination. The last time I tried to count, there were more than 120 countries with Christian majority population. And there were more than 50 countries with a Muslim majority population. It was easy to count the one with the Jewish majority because there's only one, Israel. Like the United States, Israel is not a perfect country. But if you compare Israel to the rest of the countries in the Middle East, it is by far the most tolerant country with the highest human rights standards. Despite this fact, Israel is the only country that is being targeted by some Minnesota groups which call to boycott it on the basis of human rights. It is obvious to me that Israel is being singled out just because it is a Jewish majority state. Elizabeth Fayer, who taught at the University of Richmond and at the Zayed University in the United Arab Emirates, authored the book that is titled Organizations, Gender, and the Culture of Palestinian Activism in Haifa, Israel. In her book, Fayer accurately portrayed my hometown as a model of coexistence between Arabs and Jews. Most of my family still live in Haifa, and I visit Haifa often. The largest shopping mall near my mom's home is called Akirion. It has Jewish-owned stores and Arab-owned stores, shoppers that are Jewish shoppers and Arab shoppers. Haifa is also the largest city in northern Israel, where you can find many Arab-owned businesses. Those who discriminate against Israel because it is a Jewish majority state are not doing it, as they claim, for the sake of human rights, because their boycott efforts also damage the Arab minority in Israel. In my written testimony, I have one thing that I want to share with you that I found out after I moved to Minnesota, that in 1946, Minneapolis was crowned as the capital of anti-Semitism in the US because of their discrimination against the local Jewish community. What I ask the committee today to help us vote in support of this bill so Minnesota doesn't become a state that supports discrimination against the only country in the world that has Jewish majority. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharon. Thank you to all of you. And so we will now have the other group of testifiers come forward.
Madam Chair, I wanted to make
Senator
sure that
Limmer.
the record showed that Senator Latz is here. He's been silent at this time.
Senator Limmer, my intention is at the close here to give Senator Latz an opportunity to close with you. And so now we're going to go ahead and start with testifiers. And we have a list here, Mr. Scherer, Schultz, and Cerdas. And so as you are listed in the agenda, would you please be prepared? And you'll each have 1 minute. So, Mr. Scherer, are you starting out?
Yep. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam
All
Chair
right.
and committee members. My name is Matt Shear, and I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Admin. First, wanted to thank Senator Limmer for adding the amendment. It helps us with one concern that we had about single-source contracting, but also wanted to point out a couple of different items. The first of which is that any prohibition that we put into state statute, in particular, where we would require someone to meet a certain condition, necessarily reduces competition, and that's something that does concern us. While admin does not have a position on the Arab-Israeli conflict and does not intend to, this would be the same regardless of what prohibition we're putting in statute. And I'd also like to focus more of my time on one point in particular, and that's that each time that conditions are placed in state statute, it actually increases the risk of bid protest. Generally, contractors have a tendency to keep track of their competition, and if a competing firm feels that someone is in violation of state statute, they'll protest the winning bid. And what happens, in those cases is admin has the administrative burden to assess the veracity of those claims, and that's identified in your fiscal note that you'll find in front of you.
Okay,
And
thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you you're past a minute, in fairness to the other people, all right?
Yep. Thank you very much, Madam
Okay.
Chair. That would conclude my
All
comments.
right, I think we get the sense of what you're saying here, and you're welcome to submit additional comments, all right? Okay, Ms. Sylvia Schultz is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sylvia Schwartz, a little bit different. I'm a Jewish-American woman and a resident of St. Paul, and I'm here to talk against the bill. I want to say that boycott is a nonviolent expression of protest, and it has been found so as it has been upheld by the Supreme Court as a nonviolent free speech measure. And as long ago as in 1966 with NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware Store, you can look that up. The government cannot condition the receipt of government benefits on the requirement that a person forego their constitutional rights. And I'd just like to quote a couple of quotes from Antonin Scalia, a very a proponent of free speech. He said, first of all, quote, "The first axiom of the First Amendment is this: as a general rule, the state has no power to ban speech on the basis of its content," end quote. And I believe the authors...
We do need to go on, and I know you have several testifiers, so Mr. Cerdas, Art Cerdas.
Madam Chair, the name is Art Saratov.
Okay, thank you very much for the correction, Cerdas.
You've heard about free speech. I'm not going to talk about that. But as a Jew and a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, I'm very concerned that the bill advances a dangerous and misleading definition of anti-Semitism, or in the language of the bill, discrimination against Israel. The bill equates criticism of the state of Israel with discrimination. Nothing can be further from the truth. A significant portion of the Jewish community loves Israel, but strongly opposes its behavior regarding Palestinians, especially within the occupied territories. We believe that Israeli behavior violates international law and demonstrates crimes against humanity. For me and many other Jews, Israel's behavior is a betrayal of Jewish values. The behavior is captured in the phrase Israeli leaders use to describe their periodic military suppression of Palestinian resistance. They call it mowing the grass. What's most abhorrent to me is that the Prime Minister justifies this behavior in my name.
Thank you, Mr. Cerdas. Mr. Craig Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
If you just be sure to say your name for the...
I'm Craig Harris,
Thank
and
you.
I'm speaking in strong opposition to SF 247. I'm just going to focus on my own family experience. My daughter lives in Dheisheh refugee camp in Bethlehem. She and her family are living under illegal, brutal occupation, and they are being discriminated against regularly. I am a Jewish constituent here, and I think it's important for everybody to recognize that that JCRC and this bill does not represent the values that I have as a Jew. I think it's important to reject the concept that this is an anti-Semitic initiative against Israel, and I think you should vote against this. I encourage you to have the courage to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Bill Lindberg,
Yes.
welcome.
My name
Please
is
state your name for the record.
William Lindberg, and I'm a resident of District 49 in Edina, Minnesota. I'm appearing on behalf of the Minnesota Conference of the United Church of Christ, a denomination with congregations throughout Minnesota and the country. Since the freedom of expression comment has been explored, I will focus on why our church denomination has taken a stand, especially with respect to the occupied territories and goods produced in the settlements. The impingement of freedom of expression to express views as a result of Senate File 247 is not consistent with free flow of ideas and free flow of freedom of expression. I would just add, and I passed around more extended testimony, Dean Schwartz of the Humphrey School advised the Minnesota legislature ought not to overreach. If Minnesota's legislature wants to play a helpful role in supporting Israel and a two-state solution, they should go back to the drawing board, develop a proposal more conducive to human rights, respect for the rule of law, and the long-term security of Israel. My extended testimony has been distributed.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
have received it. Thank you, Mr. Lindberg. Mr. McGrath,
Madam Chair.
would you please state your name for the
Yes,
record?
I'm Bill McGrath from Northfield. In 2007, I lived for a month with a Christian Palestinian family in the West Bank. A Jewish Israeli woman whose name was Angela Gottfried Goldstein took us on a tour to see the disastrous influence that Israel's military occupation is having on Bedouins and other Arab people in southern Judea. House demolitions, checkpoints, and denied access to water. You legislators are fortunate to have so many courageous Jewish people in Minnesota who are willing to speak out against specific policies of Israel and to speak out against this misguided piece of legislation. Senate File 247 seems like an attempt by the government of Israel to get the government of Minnesota to limit the rights of the people of Minnesota. Please vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGrath. Mr. Cohen?
Yes, my name is Barry Cohen. I'm a member of the Jewish community in St. Paul, Minnesota, a member of a congregation. I would like to say that our community is divided on this issue. Some support this bill, others, like myself, do not. Like many, I supported a two-state solution as a peaceful and just resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Sadly, I believe that facts on the ground have closed that door. Israel's military authority in its 50-year occupation of the West Bank has demolished thousands of Palestinian homes, condoned and abetted construction of illegal Israeli settlements, and expropriation of Palestinian fields and orchards for barriers, roads, and checkpoints. As military occupiers, Israel has denied Palestinians their basic human rights, and as non-citizens in occupied territories, their civil rights. As a BDS supporter, I've concluded that Israel will not negotiate or change its policies without economic pressure from communities within the U.S. and abroad. I ask our legislators to let us debate this in the public square and not take sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr.
Andrew Berman. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army, a mathematics teacher in St. Louis Park, a constituent in Senatorial District 46. Today I speak against the false charge that BDS is inherently anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. I am the grandchild of victims of the Holocaust. The Nazis entered my family's house in Russia in 1941, took all the people from the town and locked them into the local synagogue and set it on fire. This story, repeated every Passover, was seared into my brain at a very young age. I recall seeing my grandmother, the only family survivor, as she watched on television in 1961 the trial of Adolf Eichmann. I saw the sobbing, the tears in her eyes. Just a few weeks ago, my daughter with autism was at a recreational program for disabled people at the Minnesota Jewish Community Center when the bomb threat came. She was evacuated and sent home thanks to the prompt response of the JCC staff, but I was then confronted with the unpleasant task of trying to explain to my daughter with autism what had happened, why someone had threatened her life, explaining to her that some filthy anti-Semite, probably in the United States, was causing havoc. Yes, I understand the nature of anti-Semitism. The BDS movement against the the BDS movement to put economic pressure on the government of Israel is not anti-Semitic.
Mr. Berman, that concludes your time. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Vella.
Yes, my name is Alex Vella. I'd like to approach this from a slightly different aspect. What are we all doing here today? Why are we allowing a foreign government to come to the United States and try to convince local governments in every state and federal government to do something because they don't like it? BDS brought down apartheid in South Africa. It's a grassroots movement. Governments didn't bring down South Africa. BDS did, or at least it helped.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. Appreciate your testimony. We have exceeded the time that was allotted for that, and so we have concluded our testimony now.
May I be heard?
Pardon?
May I be heard?
Are you speaking for or against the bill?
Against, ma'am. I'm on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union.
You will have about 20 seconds to state your position.
Thank you.
And your name.
My name is William Pentelovich. I am the chair of the board of the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. Our position on the bill is that on its face it is unconstitutional. However, as Mr. Roberts said when he was speaking on behalf of the bill, the ACLU and the Jewish Community Relations Council have been in discussions about ways to potentially amend it so that it would not be unconstitutional on its face. Those discussions are continuing, and we would hope to have something to present back to the Senate within a matter of a few days to not more than a week.
Thank you very much for your testimony. With that, we are concluded with testimony, and so Senator Limmer, if you would come forward, and Senator Latz, and make your concluding remarks. Maybe we could start with Senator Latz, if you'd like, and Senator Limmer, if you'd like to make the final close, if that works for you.
Madam Chair,
Senator Newman.
may I ask one, I hope, short question?
We can do the short question. Can we have a short answer?
Well, may I ask the
Are
question?
you asking it of the authors?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Either to Senator Latz or Senator Limmer. In the original version of the bill, it indicated that the section, or the bill applies to Minnesota state colleges, universities, and entities in the legislative branch. The delete all indicates in subdivision 1, the legislature can't enter into a contract, and then under section 2, it says a state agency may not enter into a contract. So my, I think, pretty simple question is, who are we prohibiting from entering into these contracts?
Senator Limmer?
Chair, Madam Chair, any entity that would practice discrimination in this manner described in the bill, and there's a definition of discrimination, would be the party that we would address. The area, and it's focused on two general areas, and not only those that make contracts with the legislature, which I believe is very few, and the second area would be those who contract as a vendor with a state agency.
Thank you, Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, I know you're in a hurry, but I...
Well, Senator Newman, the big thing, we have another committee coming in this room at 3 o'clock. So I'm glad to have you, if you want a follow-up question or comment.
One quick follow-up question.
All right, Senator Newman.
Is originally we were going to deal with Minnesota State universities and colleges. I'm not sure if the University of Minnesota was involved, but the entities, Senator Limmer, that you're talking about, does it include any entities that are dealing with public money are prohibited under this bill?
Senator Limmer.
Any entity, well, if you're getting at the particular schools that were in the original bill, we've removed those from this bill intentionally. The I suppose any state agency uses public money to contract with vendors, as does the legislature. I'm not sure if your question is too broad to get a more specific answer.
Senator Limmer and Senator Newman, maybe this is I thank you for doing that. So Senator Limmer, would you like Senator Latz to lead off, and then you can close?
Yeah, that would be fine, Madam
All right, thank you, Senator Latz. Welcome to the committee. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I am Jewish. I love Israel. I criticize their settlement policy and their behavior in the territories, and I oppose the BDS movement. This bill is about whether or not Minnesota taxpayers are going to be used to support companies that participate in the BDS movement. And I, as a Minnesota taxpayer, would object to my tax dollars being used in that manner. We specifically eliminated the application of this bill to the territories. And frankly, I got a number of comments from my own constituents that said that was their main concern, and that we should be focusing only on the state of Israel in this legislation. And that's why the bill that you have before you does not apply specifically to businesses that are doing business in the territories. In my judgment, this bill is not about speech, but about conduct. About conduct. It does not stop any corporations or anyone who contracts with the state from expressing their viewpoints on peace in the Middle East or what's appropriate there, but it does address their conduct from an economic standpoint. And whether or not BDS itself is anti-Semitic, in my view, it is harmful to Israel and not productive for the advancement of peace. And I don't see any value in the state participating economically with companies that would take those kind of counterproductive steps for peace. And finally, I would reject the analogy to South Africa. South Africa is a very different situation where the whole society was organized around the suppression of a vast majority of the population there. Israel and the issues relating to the millennia of conflict with the Palestinian people, who weren't known as a Palestinian people before millennia ago, but who are now referred to that way, is a very different situation. So I will note the bipartisan and broad ideological support for this bill reflected in the authorship, and I appreciate if you would support it today.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Senator Limmer.
Madam Chairman, I have a little different perspective than Senator Latz. I am, as many people know, I am not Jewish, but I love the state of Israel as much as I love this country. And it's the way I was raised in my family. And it has a very unique place in the world. However, it also has a very unique place in our economy. The state of Minnesota has trade agreements that total over $87 million per year with the state of Israel. And the discriminatory practices that are highly organized, that are seem to pop up of various places all over the country, have a very definite impact on that very same economy and on our financial future. Discrimination does not have any place in our society. And having this type of organized discrimination practices is very harmful to our culture. As I look at this particular bill, this is in response to what is happening all over our country, and it's time for Minnesota to engage in protecting not only our economic future, but our relationship, a strong relationship with the people of Israel. And I would hope that everyone on this committee would recognize the danger of discrimination directed at a very unique trading partner with the state of Minnesota, as well as many people who are citizens here who have a very unique investment in their faith and love of that country as well.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. Well, members, we've had the bill presented to us and our time of the committee, so seeing that we can proceed with a vote on this particular bill, and I understand that this bill will be going to Judiciary, and Senator Newman, would you make the motion then?
Yeah, I would move that Senate File 247 be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Judiciary Committee.
As
on the
amended.
Judiciary.
Correct, as amended.
As
Okay.
amended.
As amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. Thank you very much, Senator
Thank you,
Limmer,
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Latz,
and committee members.
and to all of the testifiers. I know there are many difficult stories that are here in a variety of ways, not always enough time to get that all in. So at any rate, members, that concludes our business. We'll see you on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Thank you. We are adjourned.